Hello, this is Ross Bliley from the podcast Pigskin Tales. This podcast is sponsored by Sterling Soap Company. With products sold throughout 41 locations around the globe, Sterling Soap Company has a unique assortment of products to choose from for your loved one for the holidays. Handmade artisan soaps created by Roderick and Amanda Lovin since 2012, these products are affordable and provide great value. Act now and save on your shipping costs. If you purchase $75 or more, your shipping cost is free in the United States. Shop now online at sterlingsoap.com.
Imagine a town forged in the fires of industry, rallying around a band of gridiron gladiators. The Pottsville Maroons weren't just a football team, they were the embodiment of a community's grit, determination, and soaring aspirations. In 1925, they clawed their way to the pinnacle of professional football, only to have it all ripped away in a controversy that still echoes throughout the halls of the NFL. A new book is out that tells the complete story of the Pottsville Maroons. It's titled Marooned: The Rise, the Fall, and the Redemption of the NFL's Pottsville Maroons. Maroon plunges you into the heart of this captivating saga with the roar of the crowd where it mingles with the clang of the coal mines. Authors Jeffrey Payne and Darren Hayes chronicled this team's rise from the humble beginnings to the gridiron dominance and everything in between. Experience the thrill of victory as the Maroons conquer their rivals, their every triumph a testament to the small-town spirit conquering the big city odds, and the fall, and how they get the redemption and try to get their championship back. It's all covered in Maroons, and you have a unique opportunity to win an autographed copy from Sports History Network and Pigskin Dispatch. The details are found for this contest at sportshistorynetwork.com, your headquarters for sports yesteryear.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
You know, sometimes catcher's equipment is called the tools of ignorance, and for good reason. Think about it. You get in a crouch, stand behind a batter who's swinging a large wooden bat. You allow someone to throw a hard ball at you at speeds reaching over 100 miles an hour. And when needed, you stand in front of an oddly shaped plate and let someone plow you over. There was a time when catchers didn't wear any equipment. Then along came Roger Bresnahan. And next, on Sports Forgotten Heroes, we're going to take a look back at the career of the man who introduced baseball to shin guards and so much more. Roger Bresnahan.
This is Sports Forgotten Heroes, a tribute to the stars who shaped the games we love to watch and the games we love to play. Stars who provided us with many thrills, but when their time was up, they faded away. We'll take a look back at their spectacular careers, their moments of fame, even if it was just for one season or just one game. And now, here's your host, Warren Rogan.
Hello and welcome to Sports Forgotten Heroes, episode number 154, Roger Bresnahan. A star with the New York Giants in the early 1900s, Bresnahan was the first to wear shin guards. But that wasn't his only major contribution to the game of baseball. He is also the man who introduced the batting helmet, although he didn't wear one. He was once beamed while batting, and it didn't look good for him. In fact, his last rites were red. However, Bresnahan recovered and continued to play the game for years. After 7 seasons with the Giants, he was traded to the St. Louis Cardinals, where he became the team's player manager. At the time, the Cardinals were a second division club, and Bresnahan did all he could to help improve the team. And while the Redbirds did improve, his most memorable moment with St. Louis just might have been when the team was involved in a catastrophic train crash. Yes, Roger Bresnahan led a very interesting baseball life. And on this episode of Sports Forgotten Heroes, we're going to take a look back at a ton of it with John R. Hussman, who wrote a terrific bio about Bresnahan simply titled Roger Bresnahan, A Baseball Life. Now, before we jump into today's show, please follow, rate, and review Sports Forgotten Heroes. Subscribe to Sports Forgotten Heroes on X. at Sports F Heroes and look for the Sports Forgotten Heroes page on Facebook. And hey, if you want to get in touch with me, reach out by sending an email to sportsfh.info@gmail.com. That's sportsfh.info@gmail.com. And as always, thanks for your support. Okay, let's turn to today's show with my guest, John R. Husman. Hi, John. Welcome to Sports Forgotten Heroes. So glad you've decided to come along for a little discussion on Roger Bresnahan.
Well, thank you, Warren. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about Roger Bresnahan. I like doing that very much.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, you wrote a terrific book about him. And he's certainly an interesting character. And wow, he led an interesting life, to say the least, with a couple of things that happened along the way. But before we get into his career, why don't you tell me a little bit about his upbringing in Toledo, Ohio, and how his Irish heritage influenced his baseball career?
I think his Irish heritage might have influenced his baseball career. When he came up, it didn't hurt to be Irish, especially if you played for John McGraw. But we know very little about Roger Bresnahan's childhood. His parents were both from County Kerry, Ireland. They came to America via London, were in New York for a short period of time, came to Toledo by 1875. Roger was one of 8 children, 4 born in London, 4 born in Toledo. He was the seventh oldest, or 7th youngest of the 8. We know very little about his childhood. We know that he, from later records, attended grade school, 7th or 8th grade, never went to high school. And the first we know of him, besides his baptism, we have a record of that, was when he was playing amateur baseball in the highest classified amateur league in Toledo, Ohio, at age 16. From then on, we know a bit more about baseball because of his baseball, but we know very little from before that.
So you might not know this. How was he introduced to the game of baseball?
Well, I think I do know this. When he played in that league I just mentioned in Toledo as a 16-year-old, he was a pitcher, as he was all throughout his early career. And his brother also played ball and happened to be a catcher. And they traveled for 2 years in amateur circles together. Roger actually tagged along with his brother, and that's where it came from.
So he winds up in Major League Baseball. So we're going to skip right to his Major League career.
Sure.
And came up as a pitcher. And it is really interesting to note that in his first game ever, he pitched a 6-hit shutout for the Senators, the Washington Senators, against the St. Louis Browns. He didn't play a full season. I think it was 16 to 20 games, somewhere in that range.
Well, less than that, yeah.
Yeah,
he didn't make the team till September.
And he hit 375 during that time because, again, back then, obviously, pitchers hit.
Yeah.
And he was 4-0 as a pitcher, but then the Senators released him. Why?
We do not know that. He was offered. He was reserved for the following season. When spring came, he didn't report, and there were varying reports, and I've included as many of those as I could find in the book. He was labeled a holdout, but we really don't know what happened. He did not report. But being a holdout, you wouldn't think he'd be released, but the club did release him. we've seen several numbers that he was purportedly offered. One as high as $2,000, when the league maximum is $2,500. Pretty pretty good offer for a 18-year-old pitcher that's really untried. But for whatever reason, he was given his release. But he did have an ace in the hole because he immediately went to play for Toledo in the Interstate League as a pitcher. So he had that in his hip pocket, but it's hard to believe he turned down a deal like that. But the deal was never consummated.
Yeah, shame on the Senators, too, because, as we know, that was a team that never really did all that well, except for that tiny little run in 1924 and 1925.
That's right. Well, of course, that was much later, too.
Yeah.
But,
how did Roger end up with a team at that time called the Chicago Orphans, who later became a team we all know today, and then the Baltimore Orioles?
Well, he, as I told you, he came back, played for Toledo, starting the season, and Memorial Day, he had a severe accident. He was hit by a batted ball, broke his femur, and he was out. Didn't go back to Toledo, but Minneapolis of the Western League signed him. Didn't do very well there, and they let him go again. Came back, pitched another game or two for Toledo, and they let him go again as a pitcher. The following season, not discouraged, Minneapolis signed him again, released him. Buffalo picked him up, released, pitched again for Toledo, released. He landed, this would have been in the 1899 season, in Manistee, Michigan, playing what was purported to be amateur baseball, but he was paid like all the other players were on his team, for the Manistee Millionaires. They were called Millionaires because Manistee supposedly had more millionaires per capita than any city in the country. But at any rate, he goes there as a pitcher, but becomes an everyday player. He takes a regular turn pitching, plays some outfield, plays some third base and catches, comes back the next year, which would be 1900. It has another great year. The team does well, and he's offered a contract by the Orphans. Again, late season in August. He reports to Chicago. He has 2 short appearances and is released again. Over that winter, he's signed by John McGraw. John McGraw has just come from St. Louis back to Baltimore, where he made some early fame. There's a new Baltimore franchise in the brand new American League, and he found Roger, and I don't know how. He did see him play in that one Chicago game he played against the Cardinals. But for whatever reason, McGraw chose to make him one of the building blocks of his new American League team, and he was there in 1901 as a pitcher.
So that was with the team called the Baltimore Orioles, who are not the same Baltimore Orioles as we know today. I believe this Baltimore Orioles actually became New York Yankees. And by the way, for anybody listening and curious, the Chicago Orphans ultimately became the Chicago Cubs. In what ways did Rogers' versatility, or no, actually, before we get there, he was with the Orioles. How did he wind up with the team that he was probably most famous for, with being the New York Giants?
Well, at Baltimore, he was a pitcher, as I said, and they have Wilbert Robertson, a great Hall of Fame catcher. And the first year Roger was pitching, they had catching woes. They had a backup catcher that by the name of Tax Latimer that just couldn't do the job, and there was nobody else to catch. And there are a lot of anecdotal stories about how this occurred. but Roger probably volunteered, or at least was asked to try catching by Bresnahan for a couple of reasons. McGraw needed a catcher, and Roger wasn't pitching well. The only time he had pitched well professionally was at Manistee, and of course that was a lower level league. So he did some catching, spelled Wilbert Robertson, and he also played outfield and infield. And we know many of us know the story, which is a story in itself of how McGraw ended up in New York. Again, he took some of the Baltimore team with him, Roger among them. When he got to New York, there was another good catcher in place there. And again, Roger had a good bat and was good in the lineup and played a number of positions, became the Giants center fielder, was primarily a center fielder, but it was not until 1905 that he got the catching job for the Giants. So it took him a while to get it, and his versatility enabled him to hang around long enough to do that.
Yeah, so he was a pitcher, moved around to a couple different positions, like you said, and then he becomes the catcher, catching, runs in the family with his brother. What was it that led him to, this is the first real big contribution, I would say, to the game of baseball by Roger Bresnahan. What led him to introducing shin guards for catchers in 1907?
Got hurt a lot, as catchers did. And there were some cases of players wearing shin guards or some kind of shin protection under their clothing. But Roger he actually had shin guards made in 1907 and showed up with them at the very start of the season. And they were big and bulky, and there was a lot of objection to him using them, but he prevailed. He didn't know how to use them himself. He actually batted and ran the bases with them initially, and gave that up. But it wasn't long before everybody was wearing them. But the real impetus, to answer your question, Red Doohan of the Phillies knocked the plate when Roger was coming in the previous year, and Roger discovered that he had a shin guard similar, I guess, maybe to what soccer players, under his stockings, and Roger saw those, and that may have been the impetus for him designing his own and introducing them. And it was effective because
weren't they like cricket or something like that? His first ones, weren't they?
They were bulky and heavy, but they had a joint at the top to cover the knee, like they do now, and cover the top of the foot. The basic design was pretty much like we have today.
Why wasn't it so well received? What was the big deal? So what? He's using shin guards. Why wasn't it well received?
He was belittled for being soft and and made fun of, and catchers in those days were the toughest guys on the team. They probably had the hardest job and could take a lot of punishment, and he did. But he was severely ridiculed, and some of the teams tried to stop him and claim they were not legal and several things like that. But by the end of that season, a number of players were wearing them, and it wasn't many years before everybody was. And the proof in the pudding was the following year, he caught more games than any other catcher ever had, caught over 100 games, which was unheard of in those days. So he did it to protect himself and keep himself available. But he was really bullied for doing so initially by a lot of people. If
Now,
anybody could take it, he's the guy.
in another big thing happened in 1907, and of course, much later was the Rex Chapman incident. Many years later, but Roger was struck in the head by a pitch from Andy Coakley of the Reds. Um, Tell us how serious that was, and the fact that a priest actually, if I understand correctly, a priest actually read Roger his last rites.
So that's all true. He was hit above the left ear by a Coakley pitch. Uh, and several accounts I read said that the ball was caught on the fly by the first baseman. But he was down in a heap and was unconscious for a period of time. As you said, he was given the last rites, seemed to recover, was taken to the clubhouse, went into unconsciousness again, and was transported to a hospital in Cincinnati. Initial reports were dire. In fact, some newspapers reported that he had died. McGraw was told he had died and was beside himself. It was a very serious injury. It sounded like, at the very least, he'd be out for the rest of the season. But he remained in the hospital for nearly 2 weeks in Cincinnati. His wife and sister came down from Toledo, helped with nursing him for a while, brought him back home, and he was home for a week or 10 days and reported back to the Giants, ready for action against doctor's orders. But he did it anyway and proved how tough he was, I guess.
Well, he was a real gamer because he played as often as he possibly could. And in fact, the following season, 1908, played in 140 games. And then after that, it was basically, half a season each time. He was sort of like a part-time player, except for, ironically, 1914. But one thing that he also did in 1907 was he is the guy that made another big contribution to baseball with the first batting helmet. How did that influence player safety in baseball? And what can you tell us about the batting helmet?
It was a Reach built what they called a pneumatic batting helmet, which you could blow it up and fill with air. I've seen pictures of it, Reach Rat ads in some of the baseball publications, and there was a picture in one of the New York newspapers of him wearing it just before his return, and it was much ballyhoo that he was going to be doing this, but he never wore it in a game. He never appeared on the field with it.
Why is that?
I don't know. I really don't know. He never commented on it. Perhaps I could speculate that he thought it might interfere with his approach to batting, or maybe it would be somehow hinder his hitting performance. But he never did wear it in the game. Some modern day writers say that he did, but he did not.
Interesting. And then, of course, we know batting helmets didn't come along till much later on anyway. And I'm not sure that kind of batting helmet that he introduced, while it might have helped a little, it wouldn't have completely gotten taken care of the shock of getting hit in the noggin. What were the key elements, the key attributes? What made Roger one of the more respected catchers of his era?
I think number one was brains. He knew the game. He had a great memory. He never forgot. He never forgot tendencies of other players. McGraw said that of him. McGraw called him the best catcher he ever saw. And one of the attributes that McGraw proclaimed for him was that once he learned something or was told something, he never forgot it and would do it again. Uh, Other attributes was he was tough. He was not afraid of anything or anybody or any umpire, and he would do anything to win a game.
Mm-hmm. We'll get to 1905 in a moment, but are there any regular season games in particular that stand out during his career?
As a player
Yes.
performance, of course, he had many. I think one that I would touch on that was just showed something about his demeanor and attitude when he came back after the beating by Andy Coakley. He played at home in the Polo Grounds. He didn't catch. He played center field. Of course, the Reds batted first, and coming in from center field, he crossed the mound and stopped and shook Coakley's hand.
Wow.
And the crowd noticed this, and they just roared with their approval. And when I read those game accounts, I got goosebumps thinking of what that must have been like. Told a lot about the man.
Mm-hmm.
He would do he would do anything to an opponent to gain an edge, but in that case, he was a perfect gentleman.
Yeah, he was still a human, and he knew that.
He certainly was. He certainly was.
Yeah. Was there anything about his playing style to reflect the characteristics of the dead ball era?
Well, he choked the bat, and getting back to the beating, he crowded the plate. He stood right over that plate and tried to expand the strike zone, but I don't know that he was unusual in either one of those. But he did them both. He was a fearless batter, and that was one of the concerns about him. If he made it back, would he be able to stand in? And by the way, in that same first inning, after he shook Coakley's hand, he got a single, first pitch. So he didn't lose his nerve.
He had some really good seasons. I mean, in 1903, he hit 350. 1905, which we're about to get to, he hit 302. And, he had a couple of 280s in there. And 1912, although it was only in a minimal amount of games, again, he hit 333. But he was a 279 career hitter. So he could hit the ball. How did his relationship with McGraw shape his career with the Giants? You sort of touched on this. Just how key was Roger Bresnahan to the success of John McGraw's New York Giants?
Well, according to John McGraw, he meant everything to the success of the Giants, which is hard to believe when we see that he was traded away later. But there were reasons for that too. But he greatly admired McGraw. They became lifelong friends. He went back to McGraw to work after his playing days, and he emulated McGraw in every respect. Writers would refer to Roger Bresnahan as being from a McGraw school or being a McGraw clone, and he was. They were nearly identical in how they behaved on the field and how they approached the game. And as I said, they were best of friends for years.
Did McGraw's confidence in Bresnahan help with, I want to call it managing, but yeah, managing the pitching staff, particularly Christy Mathewson?
Well, I think it might have. McGraw said he was the greatest catcher he ever saw. And John Thorne made some comments. I was blessed to have him do the forward of the book. Mm-hmm. And he's a historian for Major League Baseball, as you know. It still is. But he said that catching was the toughest position on the field to play, the most important one. And he said that the way Roger played the game, he transformed the position. And, he did that with the shin guards to be sure, but he was trusted enough by McGraw to be able to call the pitches. And the pitchers trusted him. He handled pitchers very well. And in fact, he directed the team from the catching position. He was never team captain, but he acted like it. And there were other players that were made team captain while he was there. And McGraw said, why? He said, we've got other fellas that might influence to get a little more involved in the game. Roger doesn't need that. He's going to do it anyway. So McGraw was just, I can't overemphasize what an influence he was on Roger and how they admired each other.
Well, in 1905, the Giants certainly put together one of the great seasons in baseball history, going 105-48, and a classic World Series matchup. You had John McGraw on one side, Connie Mack on the other side with his Philadelphia Athletics, and the Giants came out on top in 5 games, and Bresnahan had a terrific series. Talk about that 1905 World Series with Roger Bresnahan. Might have been one of his finest moments in baseball.
Well, I think it was, and thanks for knowing that. I'm glad you read the book, Warren. And many people now that are more than casual fans will look at the history of the game. When the 1905 series is brought up, the immediate thought is, well, Christy Mathewson's 3 shutouts. That's what won the series. That was it. That's what's remembered now. Roger Bresnahan is not remembered much anyway, but especially not in that context. And not to take anything away from what Mathewson did, but Roger was there as his catcher. He also caught another shutout by Joe McGinnity. In fact, all the games in the series were shutouts. But Roger got on base half the time, was leading hitter for both teams, played airless ball behind the plate.
Yeah, he hit 313. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty
313.
Yeah.
And really established himself as the premier catcher in that series. That was when he turned the page to greatness, I think, in that World Series.
Yeah, he certainly had command over the pitching staff, was so crucial to the Giants' success. And that's where, that was early on in his days with New York. 1905, played with them again in 06, 07, 08, and then he was traded. He was traded to the Cardinals. Why? Why did McGraw ship Roger Bresnahan, such a key component to the success of the New York Giants? Why did he?
Well, there's a lot to say about that. And one of them is a tribute to McGraw because he said, and he practiced, he said that he would never stand in the way of one of his players advancing himself. So that was part of it. Another part is he traded Roger to the worst team in the National League by far and extracted their 4 best players. So he got his due. He got his due in terms of payment, but he was severely criticized by other players and New York fans for trading away Roger. And Roger was gone, but in came the Cubs and stayed there. The Giants lost a lot with him gone. They missed him.
Did Roger have managerial aspirations at that time? Did that lead where you said that McGraw wouldn't hold somebody back like that? Did was there discussions between Roger and John, or did John know that Roger ultimately wanted to be a manager?
Roger had aspirations, and they were exhibited in the early years at Baltimore. One of the first clues was in 1902, the second season in Baltimore. The American League meetings were in Detroit. Roger was a second-year major league player, well, third. Uh, he went to those meetings in Detroit, and he was hanging around the the people that were running baseball at that early stage. The next season, he made an offer along with the great I.D. Joss, who was also from living in Toledo, to buy the Toledo club with the idea that they would play and Roger would manage and pitch. So when he's barely 25 years old, he's looking to that. Virtually every winter, there were rumors of him being traded, notably to Gary Herman in Cincinnati to be player manager, or buying the Toledo club. So it was well known and well documented. So when it came up in 1908, and I detail this a great deal in the book, and my writing is research driven, and I did a lot of reading in the newspapers and have firsthand sources on what happened. I don't know how it started, but Wilbur Robertson, the owner of the St. Louis team, and McGraw and Bresnahan were talking about this in the summer. They were making a deal. They were all part of it. McGraw encouraged it. He got his due. Robertson got what he wanted, and Roger Bresnahan got what he wanted, but the Giants lost a lot.
Well, he went over to St. Louis and he became their manager. He was a player manager.
He was.
That's always not always the easiest thing to do. How did his managerial style perhaps differ from his contemporaries, and what impact did Roger's style have on his teams?
It had a big impact on them. He had a very bad team, as I already said, and he aimed to rebuild it and bring in young players and teach them his way to play ball, which everybody recognized was McGraw's way. And it was. He played the same kind of game and taught it, and everybody played all out every minute. They made mistakes, but if you were giving the effort, Roger was pleased with you. People ask me, they look at his record, it's just like his batting record, which you said was 270 in a lifetime. People now say, well, that was 50 points over the league average.
It was a dead ball era.
Right. It's the same thing in managing. He changed how that team played. They won a few more games his first year there than they had. They were perennially in last place. But they played hard and were fun to watch. And they made some progress. They didn't finish last for a change. They finished seventh, which doesn't sound like much, but they made a lot of money. Stanley Robinson was very happy. A lot of people came to games. They loved to watch him play. And he improved on that further the next year. Mm-hmm. And his third year there, he actually had them in the race into July. So the one-loss record doesn't show much, but attendance and profits showed a big gain.
But that third year also, 1911, which they did. They went 75 and 74. There was another huge incident. So, he brings on the shin guards. He gets struck in the head by a baseball, almost dies, sort of invents the batting helmet. And then in 1911, Cardinals are on their way to Boston from Philadelphia, and tragedy struck. What happened?
Tragedy certainly did strike, and I'll give you just a little background on it to show the irony of this. As you said, they left Philadelphia after a day game to play an afternoon game in Boston. They took the train as far as Jersey City, New Jersey, where the train was broken apart, put on barges with the people still in their cars, hauled around Manhattan Island up the East River to Harlem, and the train was reassembled there to continue on to Boston. On the way to Philadelphia, the Cardinals were the last two cars on the train. It was a 9-car train. When they left the Bronx, headed for Boston, they were in the first two cars behind. I'm sorry, I had that just backwards. When they left, they were behind the engine when they left Philadelphia. When they left the Bronx, they were the last two cars in the train.
And that's because Roger wanted it that way.
Well, some sources say that it was just happenstance. The railroad just put them together every which way. But the New York Times and others reported that Roger asked for that because they had sleeper cars. The Cardinals had two cars, and they would have trouble sleeping behind the noisy engine. So we're not certain. But that story about Roger requesting it came from somewhere. And the New York Times was on site, and they didn't publish stories until the next day. They were very deliberate in what they published. So it could well be that that's what happened. But that's key to what the outcome was. The train is approaching Bridgeport, Connecticut, and there's a viaduct going into the city 60 feet above the roadway below it with a switch on it. This train is taking the switch. The speed limit is 60 miles an hour, or 15 miles an hour. The train hits it at 60 miles an hour. Comes off the tracks, lurches ahead about 150 yards, rolls down the embankment, cars piling on top one another, the engine's in there. People are involved in all this, except for the last three cars. The seventh car is off the rails but stays on the viaduct. The last two cars, the Cardinal cars, never leave the rails.
Wow.
So there's this mass, and there's a couple of beautiful pictures in the book that we have of this absolute heap of rubble with people in it. 14 people died, up to 70 were hurt. But the Cardinal story and the Bresnahan story is Roger rallied his people out of their cars, and they became first responders. Roger and the Cardinals saved numerous lives that day. When the first responders from Bridgeport came to help, they stayed on hand till everybody that could be helped was helped, and they were on their way to Boston on another train much later than expected, but not before. They were genuine heroes in what they did, and the players credited Roger with knowing what to do and doing it, leading them out there. So that was just a magnificent performance, and again shows you what kind of a man Roger Bresnahan was. He didn't plan it or think about it. It happened, and he did it. And he said in Boston, he said, if our cars hadn't been switched, the Cardinals would have been wiped off the map. And the deaths came from those cars that were right behind the engine.
Incredible.
And he was right. And before I did my research for this book, I had never heard that story. It's just an amazing story.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason for me wanting to know about Roger Bresnahan is to know that story.
Yeah. Yeah. That's A heck of a story. What, not to make light of it, just a tragedy. So they go 75-74 that season, and they follow that up with a 63-90 year in 1912. Tell me about Helene Hathaway Britton. How did she get control of the Cardinals, and what was her relationship with Roger like?
Well, we met Mrs. Britton the next year when hopes were high for the Cardinals after their showing the previous year. And I'll just add that I said that they were in the running into July, but they never were the same after that accident.
I imagine not.
That had something to do with it, and they fell back pretty quickly. And then Roger brought in some minor league players to finish out the year, and some of them were very good, like Ivy Wingo the catcher. And so the next year, hopes were high, but Stanley Robeson died in the spring. Stanley had given complete control to Roger, everything. I mean, he did. He was the manager and he was the player, but I think he bought railroad tickets and handled the luggage and everything else. He had complete control of the squad. Importantly, he handled trades and the player relationships. He met Mrs. Britton, was a pallbearer for Robeson at the funeral in Cleveland. Mrs. Britton was really enamored with him, admired his methods, liked what he was doing, supported him in every way initially. Roger had a tough start to the season. They had a rough spring with weather, and he moved the team around, spent a lot of money doing that. Mrs. Britton ran the club herself for a while, but brought in some people to help her. She never gave herself the office of president, but she was really in charge. And she was so pleased with what Roger was doing, she gave him a 5-year contract at $10,000 a year, which was considerable then, but also gave him a second civil contract that awarded him 10% of the team profits.
Wow.
That's how much he thought of the man.
Wow.
But that changed over that summer. She brought in people to help her run the team, none of them baseball people. I think she got some bad advice. She began to interfere with some spending, set things up so that Roger needed to seek approval for spending that he hadn't had to do before. Made it so that he had to approve trades, and actually stopped some trades that Roger had sent to the National Commission, not knowing that he was not empowered to do that anymore. So Roger had a tough year, as I said, starting out. He was sick for a while, hospitalized. The trades that weren't allowed affected him. He resorted just to managing on the field, and the team fell apart. He had 4 years going on his contract, and he waited around St. Louis after the season to get his 10% of the profits, which there were. But when he went in to talk with Mrs. Britton about that, she fired him with 4 years left on the contract, which Roger didn't take that lying down.
Yeah.
He fought it. That's another story in itself, the fight, because he had ironclad contracts. He had friends in high places. The National Commission and the league board were owners. He was friendly with them all. They all knew he had a case, but they couldn't support Roger. A vote for Roger would be a vote against themselves. So finally, a settlement was reached. This is a long story, but that's the short of it. A settlement was reached, and Roger was paid a fine settlement, and he was made a free agent, which was a good thing to happen to him. And the bidding war was on for Roger Bresnahan. Uh, Virtually everybody wanted him, and he was a free agent. We don't know exactly what he got, but he turned out a 3-year offer from Gary Herman and the Reds of $40,000 to go with the Cubs. And for Roger Bresnahan, it was the hated Cubs.
Sure,
But the Cubs did a couple.
Why?
That's right. But the Cubs did a couple things, or had a couple things Roger liked. He liked winning and he liked money. But Charlie Murphy with the Cubs beat the $40,000 offer. It gave him a signing bonus. Some said was $25,000. We don't really know. But here he is going to Chicago. Another good catcher there already, Jimmy Archer. But Murphy hires Roger to come over, and Roger's bulging with settlement money and bonuses and his new big contract. He's a happy guy. He's in Chicago, but he doesn't have a catching job.
Well, he stayed with the Cubs for 3 years, and that third year, he was actually the manager of the team. He was player manager. They went 73-80. At that point, he was 36 years old. Had a so-so season, and then his major league career was over. Why?
Well, he was just in a position there that last year in Chicago to make good, and they did pretty well. But he went to the winter meetings to work on player acquisitions after that 1915 season. But at the same time the meetings were about to start, negotiations were going on between the Federal League and the major leagues and the National Commission, a settlement. And they did settle. Welcome the National Commission and what we'll just call Major League Baseball, organized baseball. Welcome back players that had jumped over, and some of the owners came over, and one of them was Charlie Wiegman, who owned the Chicago Whales, who were very popular in Chicago and won the pennant in 1915, the Federal League pennant. And he had a manager there, Joe Tinker, who was very popular in Chicago. The Tinker's Ever a Chance guy. So they're both under contract to the Cubs. Wiegman buys the Cubs. So he's got these two great catchers both under contract. So actually, as part of the Federal League deal, Roger Bresnahan is included in it. Given his release, and the agreement is made that he will be assisted in moving the Cleveland AAA club, which had been in Cleveland just 2 years because of the Federal League being there, removed from Toledo. So this is Roger's dream come true. He gets released, gets another settlement. He gets help in bringing the Toledo team back to his hometown, his lifelong dream. Ends up in Toledo in 1916. This all happens in April, or in March, just before the season starts. So kind of hard knocks for him, but he ends up just exactly what he wanted for years.
Well, but ultimately that doesn't work out, and I think he went on to coach a little bit too with the Giants and the Tigers. But like everybody, they fade away with time, and he passed. What was it, 1944, I think?
44, that's right, yeah.
He wasn't very old. He was in his 60s. He was elected to the Hall of Fame, I think, the year after, 45.
Yep.
What were the what was there anything unusual? Was it talk about his Hall of Fame induction?
Well, he was elected in 45. He wasn't inducted until 65, believe it or not. But uh, it was a Veterans Committee. There were very few players in the Hall of Fame in 1945, and they wanted to get more in, and they had elected a Veterans Committee to do this. Uh, 10 were elected, and I think many quite worthy. Some Roger knew and remembered him. And one of the things I learned in my research was that the people that saw Roger play appreciated him for what he was. And some of those guys voted him in. He had received votes in every Hall of Fame election before that. So he wasn't exactly a newcomer to the ballot, but he really went over the top in 1945. And a number of people, contemporary writers looking back on that, and attributed that to being a sympathy vote. Now, I don't know if it was sympathy or not. Certainly, the voters were aware of him because he had just died, and they may not have been aware of him previously. I don't know. But uh, most, it's very difficult to compare, as you know, players over decades.
Sure.
And people now have a very hard time looking at Rogers' raw numbers and thinking he should be in the Hall of Fame. In fact, Bill James early on wrote that Roger Bresnahan has no damn business being in the Hall of Fame.
Such a weird thing.
But he softened his tone later too. But many people feel that way, and honestly, it is hard to make a comparison.
Yeah,
But there are some of the sabermetrics that we have now try to do that, and I think it may give you some insight. But I pointed out just one in the book, and it doesn't tell everything. But we have OPS plus, on base plus slugging plus, which is a factor to try and equalize players across these areas. And Rogers is 126, which is very high. Johnny Bench's is also 126.
Yeah, well, there you go.
So, they're in the same ballpark, shall we say. So I don't have any trouble thinking that Roger Bresnahan should be in the Hall of Fame. And I didn't write this book or try and make the case for him. But along the way, I've come to believe that he should be.
It's so hard, John, because, I just did a podcast on one of the early ball players, a pioneer of the game, a guy by the name of Pete Browning. They call him the original Louisville Slugger. His career batting average was 341. His OPS plus was 163. He's not in the Hall of Fame. It's just he played too early. So,
Yeah.
like you said, it's really difficult sometimes just to consider people from way back then. Let me ask you this. His approach to the game, his temperament, how did all of that, his approach and his temperament, affect his relationships with teammates and opponents?
I know. I don't think teammates had any trouble with it, especially with the Giants, because most of them did the same thing. For McGraw, when he was traded, the first thing that came to my mind when he asked me about opponents was Joe Tinker was one, and a couple of other Cubs expressed how the Giants were going to miss Bresnahan and how much they feared seeing him come to the plate. He was not alone in umpires and being fiery and looking for every edge to possibly win. He did lose his temper, but I don't think it was really held against him. Perhaps at the time it was difficult to handle, but he himself knew. He said later in life that it's hard to be a good ball player if you can't control your temper. He said, I know because it cost me dearly. So it cost him himself. But I don't know. I can't recall cases where other players were upset with him for a hard-nosed player losing his temper.
You wrote a terrific book about him, Roger Bresnahan, A Baseball Life. And I'd consider you the expert on Roger Bresnahan with all the research that you've done. Of course, we can't cover everything in your book. We'd be on for a long time. We've only scratched the surface. And if we talked about everything, there'd be no reason for anybody to buy your book.
Well said, Warren. Well said. There are some good details there.
But when you take a look back at his life and career, what do you believe is his most enduring contribution to baseball?
Well, I guess I'd have to say the shin guards, because they've endured for ever since he introduced them, and it's just routine. Nobody would think about catching without them, and he made that possible.
As somebody who once went to professional baseball umpiring school, I can second that. I would never step behind the plate, even with a catcher blocking the ball for me. I would never step behind there and let somebody fire 90, 95 mile an hour hard balls at me. Not going to happen.
No.
John, thank you so much for joining me on Sports Forgotten Heroes. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Well, I appreciate your asking and having the opportunity to talk about Roger. Thanks so much.
Anytime. Thank you. For his career, Roger Bresnahan hit .279 with 26 home runs, and he knocked in 530. But, as John pointed out, his OPS plus was really good at 126, the same OPS plus as the great Johnny Bench. As a manager, Bresnahan had a record of 328 wins and 432 losses, his best season coming in 1911 when he led St. Louis to a mark of 75 and 74. Once again, I'd like to thank today's guest, John R. Hussman, and thanks to all of you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Sports Forgotten Heroes.
The heel gets the heat. The babyface gets the cheers. But the jobber gets, well, the job done. And speaking of jobbers, Barry Horowitz wasn't there to win titles. He was there to build them. By selling every move, every storyline, and every new star that stepped into the ring. He was the secret sauce. And now, he's the headline in his new book titled, Wrestling is My Gimmick, My Life on the Wrong Side of the Three Count. This memoir is a deep dive into wrestling's most underrated position, and the man who made it an art form. Whether you're a fan of wrestling, a fan of sports history, or just love a great story, this book is for you. Again, that's Wrestling is My Gimmick by Barry Horowitz. Grab your copy today before the count strikes 3.